It was Mother's Day 2020 when Suzanne Morphew, a wife and mom in the midst of a cancer battle, allegedly went for a bike ride near her home in the Colorado mountains and never returned. What started as a missing persons case quickly spiraled into a web of confusing secrets that included an affair, tranquilizer darts, deleted messages, and a husband whose stories just keep changing. Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I am doing well, just sitting by the window and watching the rain clouds roll in, hoping it doesn't start raining as we are recording.
Yes, and because I'm paranoid and it rains all the time, I am back in the closet.
Back in the closet.
Back in the closet, not like R. Kelly. Wait, no, that's Eminem, cleaning out my closet.
Right?
Yeah.
No, but
R. Kelly has something about
you're
a cabinet.
thinking of two different songs.
Hold on. R. Kelly cleaning out. Wait, no, what was R. Kelly's?
He came out.
Trapped in the closet.
Trapped in the closet. Melissa.
But you know what I do need to do? Clean out my closet. So maybe that's really what I was thinking.
Same.
Yeah, it's always every time I have to go in here, I'm like, oh, I gotta start working in this, and then I won't. I'll just be mad about it the next time I have to come in the closet. But yes, we had a great episode last week. Last Thursday is one of our extra episodes. We talked to Kate Casey with Reality Life with Kate Casey, and we talked about documentaries. And she mentioned one that I had not watched, and I started, and I am only stopping right now just to record this, and I want to get back to it. So let's get into it, Mandy.
Which one is that, though?
The Keepers. It's the one, The Keepers. That she,
okay.
There's so many layers in that, but it just is so much more than I even realized. But if you want more documentaries, that's a great episode to kind of find, like, Kate, who, like, literally talks to these directors and everybody that's involved in these, and she has a memory like nobody I've met. How many times she was just rattling off names? I'm like, off the top of your head,
right?
Like,
and dates and things,
towns, everything. I'm like, we can't even say a town whenever it's written right in front of us, and you just remembered it. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. And if you're looking for something to watch, that would be a great episode to listen to.
Awesome. So today we're discussing the mysterious case of Suzanne Morphew. She was a woman who really seemed to have it all on the outside, but her story took a dark and tragic turn on Mother's Day in 2020. Suzanne was born in Indiana in the spring of 1971 to her parents, Jean and Adrian. She was raised with a sister named Melinda and two brothers named David and Andrew. The family lived in the small town of Alexandria, Indiana, and they lived the typical small-town life. Suzanne was popular and well-liked. After high school, she went on to attend Purdue University, where she met one of her lifelong friends, Sheila Oliver. Suzanne began a career as a teacher, but she eventually decided to focus on raising a family. She married Barry Morphew in 1994, who is someone she actually knew from high school, and the couple eventually had two daughters named Mallory and Macy. As I said before, from the outside, this was a family who seemed like they really had it all, but as we know, things aren't always what they seem. Barry had a successful landscaping business in Indiana and later in Colorado, where he also owned some real estate and worked as a volunteer firefighter. He'd been drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays right out of high school, so he was kind of this local golden boy, if you will. In 2018, he convinced Suzanne to move the family to Salida, Colorado, and he said that they were moving there to be closer to one of their daughters who was in college, but Suzanne's sister later said that she believed Suzanne agreed to the move as a last-ditch effort to save the marriage. Barry later admitted that the move actually had a lot to do with him wanting better hunting. By 2020, Suzanne was in the middle of the biggest fight of her life. She'd been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the prognosis was devastating. At this time, her cancer was stage 4. Despite everything, though, she had recently gotten into mountain biking, and it was something that she was doing on a regular basis, even as she was going through treatment. Then, on May 10th, 2020, which was Mother's Day, Suzanne was reported missing. At 5:46 p.m., a neighbor told authorities that she thought Suzanne was missing and believed she'd been gone since about 8 or 9 o'clock that morning. When the police arrived at the Morphew house just to check on things, they found all the doors were locked and there were no signs of forced entry anywhere. Suzanne's car was in the garage, but she was not there. It was also noted that her bike was gone.
Later, Suzanne's blue Santa Cruz mountain bike was found tossed down a hill off a dirt road, less than a mile from her house. There were no signs of a crash, no skid marks, no blood, and no damage to the bike. It looked like the bike had been purposely thrown down in that spot. Days later, Suzanne's helmet was found about a mile away off the side of Highway 50, and there were tire tracks nearby, but otherwise no sign of any attack. Barry told the police that his wife had planned on going for a bike ride that morning. He said he left early to go on a work trip to Broomfield, and Suzanne was still asleep when he left. He said she usually wore her turquoise bike helmet and a windbreaker when she went for rides, and she would always take her phone with her. When police told Barry that they had found Suzanne's bike, he started crying and said that he was headed home. Then he asked if they had found her phone. Barry was the last person to have seen Suzanne alive, which immediately made him a person of interest. When he was interviewed, Barry said that he woke up at 4:30 that morning and left at 5 for his work trip while Suzanne was still asleep. He got to Broomfield and checked into a hotel before going to his job site. At about 5 p.m., Barry got a call from his neighbors saying that his daughters hadn't been able to reach Suzanne and they were worried about her because, keep in mind, this is Mother's Day. Barry said that he told the neighbors to look for Suzanne in the house and to look for her bike. When neither Suzanne or the bike were found, Barry told the neighbors to call the sheriff, and he said he was going to come back home. Authorities were told that Barry was driving back home and didn't have cell service, but it was later determined that he was still at his hotel and he did have service, and we'll get more into that in a bit. But authorities weren't able to get a hold of him again until 7:10 p.m.
So here's where things start to get even more suspicious. In the days leading up to Mother's Day, Suzanne and Barry had been home alone together. One of their daughters had gone on a camping trip out of state with the other daughter and a friend. Suzanne was the one who drove them to Gunnison on May 5th and sent them off on their adventure. So from May 5th to May 10th, it was just Suzanne and Barry in the house. And according to those who knew the couple, that really wasn't a comforting thought. A man named Jeff, who will come into the story again later, told investigators that anytime Suzanne was alone with Barry, she dreaded it. She had told him that she didn't want to be alone with her husband. And even though Barry told the police that he had left his house for his work trip super early that morning, the investigators started to realize that that story really wasn't lining up. They talked to Barry's employee, Morgan, who told them a completely different story. She said the plan was for her and Barry to leave for Broomfield together on the evening of May 10th, not first thing in the morning. But then at the very last minute, Barry changed the plan and just simply left town without her. He called her at 11:18 that morning and let her know that he was already on the way to Broomfield. When Morgan arrived later that evening, she realized that Barry hadn't even brought the proper tools along for the job, and some of the crucial tools that were supposed to be delivered to the job site actually weren't there either. Barry claimed that he didn't want to pick up Morgan because she smoked and he didn't want to ride in the car with her.
And didn't bother to tell that before?
Right,
Tell her that
wasn't
before
very
he
nice of
left?
you. I know,
Yeah,
to just
rude.
leave her hanging without a ride. But Morgan told the police that Barry called her at 6:09 p.m. on May 10th, that's Mother's Day, and told her that he had to go home due to a family emergency. It wasn't until the next morning that he told Morgan that his wife was missing and said that he believed a mountain lion had attacked her.
Wow. Investigators received footage from the hotel and other businesses in Broomfield that showed some of Barry's movement on May 10th. What they found was that Barry's story wasn't quite lining up with the facts. Barry actually spent less than 30 minutes at the job site on May 10th, despite claiming that that's where he was all day. And the rest of the time, he was driving around Broomfield, stopping at various locations and throwing things into different trash cans. For a good chunk of the day, between 12:34 p.m. until almost 6 p.m., he was holed up in his hotel room. He told the police that he was at work when he learned that his wife was missing, but evidence showed that he was really at the hotel. When Barry left that hotel room, his coworkers noticed that it reeked of chlorine, but Barry had no explanation, and he blamed the odor on strong cleaning supplies that were being used because of COVID. Again, this is 2020. When police started digging into Barry and Suzanne's marriage, Barry was very quick to paint a picture of a very happy couple. He told them that they had the best marriage, and if Suzanne were there, she'd say the same thing. He said they just spent a wonderful weekend together. And at first, one of the couple's daughters backed that up and said there were no issues between her parents. But in a later interview, she opened up about it and said that her parents actually did fight a lot. And at the time of her mom's disappearance, she believed they were headed for separation. I totally understand how a kid would do that, to be like, my dad didn't do, my
Right.
dad's not a part of this. Everything's fine. Like, stop looking here, look somewhere else. Like, there's, somebody else did this. So I don't blame her at all. But she said the couple was not doing well and things felt unsafe emotionally. She admitted that she thought it would be for the best if her parents did get separated. When asked if she thought her mom would ever just up and leave without telling anyone, the daughter said no. Suzanne would never do something like that. If she wanted to leave, she would have let her girls know what was going on and that she was safe and okay. And what's even more heartbreaking is a text sent from the youngest daughter's phone at 3:50 p.m. on Mother's Day. The message said, "I'm just so sad. My sister and I text mom for Mother's Day and she still hasn't answered. And I'm scared her and dad probably got into a big fight and I don't even know. It just made me want to be gone even more because I don't want to be around them. It hurts me." Later in 2021, Barry himself admitted to the FBI that things hadn't exactly been perfect at home. He admitted that his daughters had been dragged into at least one of their arguments in the past, which was something that upset Suzanne a great deal. Those close to the couple said that Suzanne and Barry did not have a happy marriage, and in fact, Suzanne had been unhappy for months. After she went missing, several people told the police that they thought Barry had killed her, or said that they wouldn't be surprised if he did. One of Suzanne's close friends named Sheila said that Barry was very domineering and controlling. According to an arrest affidavit in January of 2020, Suzanne took steps to separate from Barry. And we'll get right back into it after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Did you know the liver is the second largest organ in your body? It's responsible for over 500 functions, and yet we rarely talk about liver health. Let's be real. It should get way more love.
Over 30% of Americans have a sluggish liver, but it often goes unnoticed until it's a big issue. And that's where Dose comes in. They're on a mission to help us maintain healthy liver habits, and they've created something really special to make it easy.
I've been using Dose for Your Liver, and let me tell you, this stuff really works. It's a science-backed, potent formula that helps support liver function, eases digestion, and even helps with bloating. And did I mention it's a total energy booster?
That's right. In a clinical trial, Dose for Your Liver helped lower liver enzyme levels by 50% in over 86% of participants. If that's not impressive, I don't know what is.
Plus, it's gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and vegan. So if you're looking for a natural way to maintain liver health and feel better overall, Dose is the way to go. You'll notice better digestion, more energy, and reduce bloating in no time.
So if you've been looking for a way to take care of your liver, and let's face it, we really all should, give Dose for Your Liver a try. It's like giving your liver the TLC it deserves. Trust me, you'll feel the difference. Save 30% on your first month of subscription by going to dosedaily.co/moms or entering moms at checkout. That's dosedaily.co/moms for 30% off your first month subscription.
Okay, I know I'm late to the party, but I finally tried Skims after all the hype, and I'm never looking back. I've heard so much about all their products, but I was especially excited to try out the Fits Everybody collection, but I honestly had no idea what I was missing. These bras are so comfortable. It's like they were made just for me. If you haven't tried them yet, consider this your sign.
I couldn't agree more. The Fits Everybody collection is really incredible. I've always had a hard time finding a bra that gives me support without feeling too tight, but these are actually the perfect balance. The fabric is soft and it molds to your body like a second skin. I barely feel like I'm wearing anything.
Exactly. And for me, the Fits Everybody triangle bralette is my new go-to. I love that it gives me lift and support without feeling suffocating. It's just so breathable and comfortable, I never want to take it off.
Same here. I wear mine all the time, whether I'm running errands or just lounging at home. It's supportive, but it doesn't dig in, and the softness is unlike anything I've worn before.
If you've been on the fence about trying Skims, just do it. Trust us, once you try the Fits Everybody collection, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it.
Shop Skims Fits Everybody collection and more at skims.com. After you place your order, be sure to let them know we sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. And now back to the episode.
Before the break, we introduced Suzanne Morphew, a mom on a cancer journey who seemed to have an otherwise happy life, but behind closed doors, her marriage to Barry was falling apart. On Mother's Day 2020, Suzanne allegedly went out for a bike ride and never came back. Her bike was found dumped down a hill and her helmet was found a mile away. There were no signs of an accident, there were no blood, and no skid marks. Barry claimed that he was away on a work trip, but his story was starting to fall apart. Surveillance showed that he had spent most of the day in his hotel room or driving around dumping things in trash cans, but his timeline kept changing and his hotel room reeked of chlorine. Friends, family, and even one of the couple's daughters later admitted that the marriage wasn't what it seemed. Suzanne had been unhappy, and people close to her said they wouldn't have been surprised if Barry was involved in her disappearance. A search of the couple's home and of Suzanne's electronic devices revealed notes created by Suzanne about problems in her marriage to Barry, including different abusive things. The list included very specific times that Barry had done things to her that were just unkind or straight up abusive, and it included things like mental abuse while drinking on New Year's Eve, said I only needed him for money. Another thing was took phone. She also has slam on brakes when angry, threatened to jump out of car. She had a bullet point that just said gun. She had,
Gosh.
I know, these are like horrifying things. Wiring money from investment account without discussing. And then she had a note that says left 2 times on treatment weeks. And there was many more
Oh,
things.
wow.
Suzanne also used a spy pen that her friend Sheila gave her to record conversations with Barry at home. Investigators did find the pen at the house, and the audio recordings were later recovered. Those recordings showed that money was a huge issue in the couple's marriage. A text exchange between Suzanne and Sheila on March 25th highlighted some of Suzanne's frustrations. She vented that she had been taking care of herself physically and in a stressful marriage at the same time. And she said she and her daughter had actually talked about this tension at home, and her daughter was practically begging Suzanne to divorce Barry. Sheila asked Suzanne if she had talked to Barry about splitting up at all, and Suzanne said, quote, "He probably thinks I'm not strong enough to do it, given finances." Suzanne mentioned that she had discussed this idea of getting a restraining order with her 16-year-old daughter and talked about how it made her feel sick that she even had to have that conversation with her child. She also described Barry as having a Jekyll and Hyde personality and said that he won't speak of divorce. She said he was begging for another chance and she felt very torn, but she said in her heart she knew exactly who Barry was.
Just 2 days before her disappearance, Suzanne sent a text to her sister Melinda where she talked about how hard it was to deal with Barry's abrasiveness and hard to even show him respect. She said she was angry that she had allowed him to treat her this way. Melinda was actually shocked by this text, and when she found out that Suzanne was missing 2 days later, she just felt in her gut that Barry had killed her. Melinda explained that Suzanne had been treated like a submissive housewife, expected to play a role, and to put up with all of it. Of course, investigators went through Barry's phone as well, and what they found was suspicious. They discovered a deleted text thread between him and Suzanne, but someone, which was likely Suzanne, had taken a screenshot of that conversation on May 6th, so the evidence was still there. The screenshot showed that the text Suzanne sent to Barry said, quote, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly," end quote. Suzanne had long suspected that Barry was cheating on her, and the forensic download of his phone didn't help his case. On his phone were internet searches, including ones like, "Find a cute girl near Salida." For his part, Barry denied making any such searches. Soon, it was learned that Suzanne had also been having an affair. She had reconnected with an old acquaintance named Jeff who lived in Michigan. They first started messaging in mid-2018, just after the Morphews moved to Colorado. Over time, the friendship turned into something more. What started as daily messages on Facebook, LinkedIn, and WhatsApp eventually became a full-blown relationship. By 2019, Suzanne and Jeff were meeting up in person. She was traveling to places like Indianapolis, Dallas, Michigan, and Florida to meet with him. Suzanne's last communication with Jeff was on May 9th, the day before her disappearance. At 2:11 p.m., Suzanne sent Jeff the last message she'd ever sent him. Barry returned home 32 minutes after that text was sent, and the last bit of electronic activity on Suzanne's phone was logged at 3:08 p.m. on May 9th, over 24 hours before anyone reported her missing.
Jeff tried to send Suzanne a couple more messages that afternoon, but she never responded, which was completely out of character for her. Phone records did indicate that Suzanne was a regular texter, so it was very strange that she wasn't replying to friends and family who were trying to reach her that day. Despite all of this, Barry tried to insinuate that he and Suzanne had a nice night together on May 9th. He claimed that he made steaks for dinner, then the couple had sex and went to bed. He said he fell asleep before Suzanne did, but the details of that night did continue to change. By June, Barry had added that he and Suzanne went on a hike together that afternoon, but investigators were later able to prove that did not happen. When Jeff was asked about all of this, he said that he did know about the struggles that Suzanne was having in her marriage and that she was trying to figure out how to leave. She had told Jeff that she didn't think Barry would ever actually hurt her. And according to Suzanne, keeping Barry happy meant keeping him sexually satisfied, but that didn't mean that Suzanne was actually enjoying it. In fact, she even told Jeff that she wished Barry would find a girlfriend so he would leave her alone.
Wow.
Yeah. Jeff told the investigators that he thought Barry either learned about them and snapped, or maybe Suzanne had told him that she was planning on leaving him. As it would turn out, Barry had actually been suspicious of Suzanne's affair since 2019, and he'd been actively trying to confirm these suspicions. He had started stalking her around the house, and at one point he snatched her phone out of her hands while she was talking to Jeff, but he couldn't figure out who the guy was that she was talking to. Suzanne even made a note in her phone that Barry had accused her of having a boyfriend on May 6th, which was 4 days before she vanished. On May 11th, police searched the Morphew home and collected potential evidence, DNA swabs, and anything else that might give them a clue about what happened to Suzanne. None of what they found supported the idea that a random stranger had come in and taken her, and the things they did find actually raised a lot of eyebrows. Inside of a locked gun safe, they found a tranquilizer rifle and packages of tranquilizer darts. There were also 2 guns found inside the house that were not locked inside of a safe. They also found something pretty damning. There was a load of laundry in the dryer that included a pair of men's shorts that matched the description of the ones he was seen wearing on May 9th, and mixed in with those shorts was the cap to one of those tranquilizer dart needles.
Whoa. But Barry had a history with tranquilizers. Back in Indiana, he was a deer farmer, and people who knew him said he'd used a tranquilizer called BAM to sedate and move deer. Barry admitted to using BAM both in Indiana and in Colorado. He said he tranquilized a deer on their property just a month before Suzanne disappeared. But the tranquilizer cap wasn't the only thing they found in the home. In the primary bedroom on the floor next to the bed, investigators found an unfired .22 caliber round. According to phone records, he turned his phone off and on multiple times between May 9th and 10th, and each time he turned his phone off, it disabled location tracking. This is interesting because nowadays, no one turns their phone off. Your phone is always on.
Right.
Unless it dies, then you charge it, and then you've got it again. But nobody's turning it off and on unless you are literally trying to avoid. I truly can't think of another reason. Either you legally have to at your job or something, or you're trying to hide something, because otherwise, why would you do it? So the phone was shut off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th, just minutes after he got home. And it stayed off until 10:17 that night.
Which, again, I feel like in this day and age, who's going that long without looking at their phone at all? Who goes from, 2:47 until 10:17 and doesn't want to check their phone? I'm suspicious right away.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is during that time, that's when Suzanne has texted Jeff. So we know that he's home with her at that time. And so that kind of puts in my head what could have happened. After that, there's nothing on his phone for hours. It's possible it was put in airplane mode as well. Again, something you don't use a whole lot unless you have to and not in your home. Either way, the phone wasn't recording anything. So he turned it back on at 5:37 a.m. as he was supposedly headed to Broomfield. Telematics from Barry's truck, which is basically the truck's internal tracking system, showed activity between 3:25 and 3:49 a.m. on May 10th, which was in the Morphew's driveway, which of course is weird because Barry claimed he didn't get up until 4:30. There's also a gap in the truck's data right at the time he claimed to be driving to Broomfield. Suzanne's phone, though, was never found. Less than a month later, Barry filed paperwork in Indiana to be granted guardianship over Suzanne, which would give him the power to sign documents in her name and sell off their properties, which, by the way, he started doing immediately. According to CBS News, male DNA was found in Suzanne's car, and in October of 2020, a partial match came back to 3 unsolved sexual assault cases in Tempe, Phoenix, and Chicago. This is really the only piece of evidence that's out there that points away from Barry. So as investigators continued to question Barry in the months after Suzanne disappeared, his words and attitude started to speak volumes about who he was and how he operated. Right off the bat, Barry tried to shift the focus of the investigation by claiming that Suzanne struggled with drug and alcohol abuse and that she'd been using substances to cope. He claimed he deleted messages about it from his phone because he didn't want his daughters finding them. It was also noticed that Barry had a scratch on his arm, which he said was from a tree when they were out hiking. Barry named several other people he thought the police should look at and kept asking why he hadn't been cleared as a suspect yet. He said he was frustrated that people were still suspicious of him. It was suggested that maybe he could take a polygraph to help clear his name, but Barry said he didn't think he would pass. Now, that's different than saying, I don't want to take one. Is to say, I don't think I'd pass. That's a little different.
I mean, at least you're honest.
I guess.
But it doesn't help your case, buddy.
At all.
Right. On May 21st, Barry doubled down on this idea that Suzanne had been abusing substances, including alcohol and antidepressants, to cope with the stress and anxiety of cancer treatments. He also claimed that it was Suzanne who wanted to move to Colorado. Then Barry made the most ridiculously, full of audacity, just all the audacity in the world comment I've ever heard, to the investigators who are trying to figure out what happened to his wife. He said, "We, as in we men, need sex. That's all we need, and we'll be good." That's a weird thing to say when your wife is missing and the investigators are trying to figure out where she is. Is it not?
I feel like that's one of those, that's an inside thought, especially in this kind of an investigation. Like, if you really think that, just don't say it.
Right. How is that an appropriate thing to say in this context or in this investigation?
No.
Yeah. But that really just was literally Barry's take on marriage. He described, and when he spoke about the arguments that he and Suzanne had, he described her as being mean and angry. It was clear that Barry really did have some kind of hang-up about his sex life because when he was asked why someone might want to make Suzanne disappear, if that was what happened, if someone had taken her, he went straight to the topic again. He replied, "Sex, because my wife is beautiful, and that's my nightmare right now. Like if somebody's got her and sexually abusing her right now as we speak." That just gave me the biggest creeps. I'm like, what? I don't know.
We covered the Sherry Papini documentary on HBO Max, and one thing her mom said, basically, which was so wild to me, and this is only the second time I've heard it, is like, I thought she was going to be a sex slave because she's so beautiful. So hearing this, I was like, really? People even say this? This is so wild because it seems like, I don't know, it's just such a weird way of talking about your wife.
Yes, exactly. And there's literally no evidence that she was abducted or anything of the sort. So, it is just very odd. Just to me, speaks to, where Barry's thoughts are and, where his head is at, for sure. So, during the same interview, Barry revealed that he gave Suzanne a weekly spending allowance because, according to him, she didn't want to go to the ATM. By May 28th, Barry started talking more about these tranquilizer darts that were in a safe in the couple's house. He said that he had used these back in Indiana, but he had not used them since they moved to Colorado. In June of 2020, Barry's deflections reached a completely new level when he suggested to the police that Suzanne's own family might be involved in her disappearance. He said that her siblings were into marijuana and might have had something to do with it. He actually called her sister Melinda wicked and said that her brother David was a brilliant man, definitely smart enough to do something like this. That's what Barry said.
Interesting that he calls the woman wicked and the man brilliant. When you're really trying to say the same thing, they both could be capable of this.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Ironically, though, he also said, sometimes when people are guilty, they point the finger because of their guilt. Literally while he's pointing the finger.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes they like to give like little breadcrumbs through these
Yeah,
stories, and
for
that
sure.
might be one.
By July 8th, Barry was getting really deep into the details, and he was telling investigators exactly what he and Suzanne did on the night of May 9th, including what they ate and the fact that they used 2 plates when they had their meal. This was interesting to the authorities because only 1 plate was actually found in the dishwasher.
In the history of your life, have you ever like willfully shared a plate with your husband? You
Never.
might eat something off of the plate, but even like romantic, that does not sound romantic at all.
Mm-mm.
Romantic is a full meal, appetizer, meal, dessert for me. Don't make me share on your plate. So this just seemed like, why would you even make that comment that you use 2 plates? Like,
Right.
duh.
Well, of course, right. Of course, there was 2 plates. There was 2 of you, right? So, like, it doesn't make a
Right.
lot of sense. But as I said, there was only 1 plate found in the dishwasher. And so when they confronted Barry with that, he said he must have hand washed his plate. Again, when has a man ever hand washed a plate on his own accord?
I had the same thought. I was like, this is digging you in a hole because these are
Right.
just not things that happen. I mean, I was already into it with the
Right.
laundry, but,
As
I
soon
let
as
that
he
go.
said, I must have hand washed it, I would have been like, you didn't.
Yeah,
You didn't.
jail.
You did not. But that's what he said. But in a later interview, he ended up changing the story and then went on to what you were just saying. Now he says, actually, you know what? I didn't hand wash the plate. I forgot. We ate off of 1 plate together in our home where we have multiple plates available. By early 2021, Barry was still giving interviews and still contradicting himself with each of the interviews. It was around this time that the FBI finally told Barry about Suzanne's affair with Jeff, and Barry claimed that he had no idea until they told him, and then he tried to spin the entire thing, honestly, in the most absurd and outrageous way you could possibly imagine. He suggested to the investigators that perhaps whatever happened to Suzanne was God's way of punishing her for
Oh
having an
my
affair.
gosh.
He said in part, if I would have known this in the beginning, I wouldn't have had to suffer for 9 months not knowing why God did what he did. I'm not saying he did it to punish Suzanne, but it makes more sense than what I knew before you guys came today.
That's a
I'm at a
real
loss for
person
words.
that said that.
I'm at
That
a
is
loss
a
for words.
crazy thing to say. So it's not I would have known more about where my wife could have. It's nothing helpful about Suzanne. It's like I have suffered wondering why God did this to my
Right.
wife, not where is she, what's happened. That is a crazy, wild
Crazy.
statement to say. To the police.
To the police. Yeah, absolutely mind-boggling. And there is a lot more mind-boggling subject matter to get into with this one after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Greetings from the sun. Just kidding. But this summer is hot and it's not even fully here yet. If you're like me and you get overheated easily, you need to check out my favorite thing, like literally my favorite thing, my Boll & Branch waffle blanket. It's cozy, but it doesn't make me sweat, which is a must when you live on the hot side of the sun.
I am totally obsessed with this waffle blanket. It's way too hot down here to have something heavy to cover up with at night, but going without a blanket is also not a thing. There's monsters under the bed, of course, and I need my feet covered every night. This blanket is the perfect solution.
Exactly. And if you're looking for cool comfort, Boll & Branch's percale sheets are the way to go. They're crisp, breathable, and have a special cooling weave, which I didn't even know was a thing before this. You won't ever sleep hot again. Plus, they're Boll & Branch sheets, so they get softer with every wash.
I love that they're made with organic cotton, toxin-free, and crafted by artisans who earn fair wages. It's a total win.
You can feel the difference the second you get into bed. Plus, they come with a 30-night worry-free guarantee, so you can rest easy knowing you'll love them.
Get the best savings of the season during Boll & Branch's annual summer event. Get 20% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/moms. That's Boll & Branch, BOLLAND branch.com/moms to save 20% and unlock free shipping. Limited time only, exclusions apply.
And now back to the episode. Before the break, we saw how the investigation kept uncovering more and more red flags about Barry Morphew and the state of his marriage. Police also discovered Barry's suspicious behavior, like deleted texts, searches for other women, and a history of tracking Suzanne around the house. Meanwhile, Suzanne had started an affair with an old friend, Jeff. Their last communication was the day before she disappeared. And after that, she went silent, which was completely out of character. But Barry's timeline fell apart too. His phone and truck records didn't match the story. He turned off his phone at key moments, and investigators found a tranquilizer dart cap mixed in with his laundry. He also deflected blame onto Suzanne's family, painted himself as the victim, and even suggested that Suzanne's disappearance was God's judgment for her affair. And although Barry is still acting shocked over the news of this affair that Suzanne was having, he was still trying to dig for details. He pressed the FBI for information about who the man was or where he lived and how long the affair had been going on. The agents didn't give Barry much information, which is very good, and told him that he probably already knew the answers. So basically, like, why are you even asking us? You know you've been into her stuff and you've figured this out before. But Barry tried to get ahead of the allegations that were sure to come by making a comment about how he knew they were just going to say that old hothead Barry found out about his wife's affair and killed her. Barry said that it was Suzanne who was always paranoid that he was cheating, but he insisted he'd never touched, talked, or texted another woman. When it came to all the strange behavior on the day Suzanne disappeared, like the driving around to all these different trash cans and whatnot, Barry said it was nothing. He said that his truck is always messy and he always stops to throw things away in random places.
Melissa.
As someone who still, to this day, has a car that sometimes has some trash in it, one and done. I'm not going to 15 different places.
No. And like sometimes I will throw things away, like if I'm at a gas
At the
station
gas
and I'm like,
station,
I
yeah.
have to get some of this out of my car so I have room for the new snacks I just bought. But like I'll do it like while I'm standing at the gas pump or something, like, or whatever, or take it up and throw it, in the trash
I'm
on the
not
way up to
walking
the door.
further. It's got to be right next to me.
I'm not driving around town to go to clean out my car.
Yeah, no, that doesn't make a lick of sense. I do understand, though, he does work in landscaping and stuff, so maybe he is collecting stuff as he goes along, but it just seems like a weird thing that you'd need to make so many stops. You'd think it'd be like the end of the day, you'd go get rid of all this stuff. Otherwise, again, kind of like the phone thing before, it seems like there's a reason you are going to different places and not just to one.
And it's just so convenient, right? Like,
Very.
I always do that. like
I wonder,
sure.
like gaslighting the FBI.
Right.
It's such a crazy thing. Then Barry was asked if he'd ever hit his wife, and he actually admitted that he did. But he said it was just one time, and he justified this by saying that she, meaning Suzanne, had physically come at him several times in their marriage, and he just took it. He claimed Suzanne left scratches on his face, and he just had to lie about where they came from. But he said he would never lay a hand on his wife. The one time it happened was just a crazy reflex, is what he called it. The next day, Barry spoke to the FBI again and asked whether they thought that maybe Suzanne had simply just run away. But he continued to ask more questions about the affair. As 2021 progressed, it was clear that the more evidence the FBI showed Barry, the more his story changed, and therefore the more he tried to deflect and manipulate the narrative. On February 28th, Barry was still fixated on Suzanne's affair, and he once again asked the FBI for the man's name and tried to confirm whether some of Suzanne's trips were to see this man. What is that going to do at this point? Like, unless this guy is a suspect or whatever, what is having that information going to do? It seems like the wrong thing to be looking for.
Right, but I do believe that he may not have known exactly who the other man was. Like, he may have known for sure that there was someone, but I feel like he was legitimately asking because he didn't know, like, the man's name and, like, personal information. Because if he did, I don't think he would have been asking the FBI.
Yeah, my point was, like, if it was just your wife had an affair, she died, nobody thinks that other guy did this, and he's not involved, why do you need to know about the trips? Why do you need to know who exactly it was? Like, that's done and gone. So you wouldn't be asking that, like you said, unless you needed that information and you were heated about it and still wanted to know that. And I'm
or
glad
still
the police weren't.
he's, doing the whole thing where he's trying to make himself a victim of some kind.
True.
So he's looking for evidence of her being a villain, essentially.
Right.
He's like trying to figure out, like, oh, can you guys confirm that she was having, she was doing her affair stuff, like when she was on this trip? Like, he's just looking for more evidence,
True.
that she was the one that was the problem, not him.
Good point.
I feel like that's exactly what was going on there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. The agents told him, though, what he already suspected, that the affair had been going on about 2 years and that it started through social media. Barry then asked what app they used, and the agents wouldn't tell him. And that's when Barry said he needed to know who the man was for closure and said he wasn't going to do anything to the guy. He just wanted to know who it was for his own peace of mind, and again insisted he had no idea that it was happening at all. But as we know, evidence showed that Barry had been trying to figure out if Suzanne was having an affair since 2019, so he knew.
During that same interview, Barry changed his story again about the events of May 9th. This time, he admitted that he was carrying a gun around the property, which he said he was using to shoot chipmunks. He said that, explained some of that unusual activity on his phone that showed him moving all around all over the property that day. But investigators believe he wasn't out there chasing chipmunks. By early March, Barry's account had changed to fit more of the evidence that, of course, he's now learned about through speaking with the FBI, evidence that he didn't know about at first, but now he's had more information, which has helped him shape his story. So for the first time ever, he admitted that as he left the house on May 10th, he turned left on Highway 50. Now, that's the opposite direction from the route to Broomfield, where he was supposed to be going for his work trip, but it is the same direction that Suzanne's helmet was later found. Barry said he went that way to see where some elk were going. He just basically said, you know what, I was on my way to go to this planned work trip, and I, just like a little kid, saw some elk, got distracted, turned completely out of the direction I was going to go follow them and see where they were going. Again, that's not something people do.
No, it really isn't. And I have to say, I don't think I would admit to doing that if I actually did. I think I'd be
exactly.
like, I can drive in a straight line.
Right. But of course, this little detour he supposedly took conveniently explains some of the missing miles from his odometer and when they were adding up, where he went. On March 5th, Barry made a desperate plea and asked for immunity and pretty much begged to not be thrown in jail. He insisted that there was no evidence against him, and he claimed that he was the victim of Suzanne. He said that she made him a monster and that if he had abused her in any way, it was emotionally, and it was only because she provoked him by accusing him of cheating when he wasn't. Barry said that Suzanne's phone should have been found by now, and he said that he always had an intuition about her affair. He actually alleged at this point that Suzanne was drunk when he came home in the afternoon of May 9th. In several other interviews, he had said that she was outside sunbathing when he got home. Almost a full year after Suzanne disappeared, Barry was finally arrested on May 4th, 2021, and the charges were serious. He was being charged with first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, tampering with physical evidence, possession of a dangerous weapon, and attempting to influence a public servant. He pleaded not guilty to all of it. For a while, it seemed like the case was headed to trial. Barry was released on bond that September, and the trial was set for the spring of 2022. But then in a surprising turn, everything changed. On April 19th, just days before this trial was set to begin, prosecutors asked the judge to dismiss the case without prejudice, which meant that they would be able to file charges again in the future. And the judge agreed to this. The prosecutors explained that they weren't dropping the case because they thought Barry was innocent by any means. They just wanted more time to search for Suzanne's remains, and they admitted that without her body, they just did not really have enough to get a conviction. They hoped to be able to finish the search before the trial, but the weather and snow had made that impossible, and they just wanted more time.
But the lack of a body wasn't the only blow to the prosecution's case. The judge had recently barred the prosecution from calling several of their key witnesses because they had failed to hand over crucial pieces of evidence to the defense, including DNA evidence like that male DNA that was found in Suzanne's car that didn't match Barry. That meant the defense didn't have what they needed to prepare, and the judge wasn't just going to let the state benefit from that. But that's not all. Two of the prosecutors, along with the DA, were later accused of misconduct over how they handled the case. State regulators eventually ruled that the DA should be disbarred for withholding evidence and for the way that Barry's case was managed. After the charges were dropped, Barry and his daughters went on Good Morning America. The girls stood by their father and said they did not believe that he had anything to do with their mother's disappearance. One daughter said, quote, "We're never going to stop looking for our mom," end quote. Barry's attorney also spoke out and said the prosecutors needed to be held accountable for the damage they've caused Barry, which they said is irreparable at this point. And just like that, Barry was a free man, at least for the time being. But even after the charges were dropped, Barry wasn't exactly off the hook. He still had more court battles ahead, and not all of them had to do with his wife's disappearance. Barry ended up facing criminal charges for forgery, attempting to influence a public servant, and mail ballot fraud. After Suzanne had been missing for 6 months, Barry submitted a ballot in her name during the 2020 presidential election. Barry claimed he didn't know you couldn't submit a vote on behalf of your spouse.
This guy's got to be the dumbest person I've ever heard.
I mean, really, like the things that he doesn't know, I'm like, were you frozen in time for 40
How
years?
Have you made it this far in life? Obviously a lie. Everyone knows you can't do that. Barry.
Yeah, that's a very, I don't understand that at all. That's crazy. So this was actually caught right away by the county clerk, who noticed that the ballot belonged to a missing person, and they reported it to the sheriff's department.
That I thought was really cool to me that that they actually flagged it like that quickly. I was surprised. Yeah, I was surprised to hear that. But I mean, of course, it's databases, and I'm sure like it's all connected. But like that is very interesting that they flagged that quickly and alerted the sheriff's department.
Barry was also fighting for a $15 million civil rights lawsuit. That's right, he filed a complaint about the prosecutors and asked that they be punished and disbarred. And he asked for $15 million to remedy the fact that he was wrongfully charged in Suzanne's alleged death and that his rights had been violated. The fact that people go to prison for 20 years and don't get $1 million makes me say 15 million's that's not your number there, Barry.
It just feels like during this whole thing, he's been trying to like just hurry up and quickly push things along and shut the door on everything, right? And he's like, because truly the only reason they didn't take him to trial right then and there is because they were waiting for see if they could find Suzanne's remains. Literally, they have evidence against you, Barry. Like, it's not like they don't have a case. They have a very good case, but we all know from listening to these stories, it is very hard to get a conviction if you don't have a body and you can't prove someone's cause of death or that they are even deceased. Like, you have to have that. It's a huge component in a murder trial, of course. So it makes sense. But the fact that Barry was like, just because they basically said, we're putting this on hold for a minute, while we figure this out, Barry was like, all right, I'm suing you now. You've wrongfully charged me. You've done this and that. I'm like, okay, it's very clear that you're making these desperate attempts just to get things closed out and done so that you are free and clear.
In September of 2024, the judge dismissed the case and ruled that while the prosecution may have handled some things poorly, that didn't mean that Barry was wrongly charged. There was still evidence, like Mandy was saying, that he had a motive, means, and the opportunity to kill his wife, and it was proven that his alibi was fabricated and his credibility was dubious.
Finally, after years of searching, the answers everyone had been bracing for arrived. On September 22nd, 2023, human remains were found in a shallow grave less than an hour south of the Morphew home near Highway 17. These remains were identified as belonging to Suzanne. Along with her decomposed remains were some of her clothing, including pieces that matched what she would have worn on a bike ride, as well as her cancer port. What really stood out was the condition of Suzanne's remains. The bones showed significant bleaching, and experts concluded that her body had not been in that spot for the entire time. The lack of insect activity, animal damage, and just the way the clothing had decomposed suggested that she had been moved there at some point. Because if her body had been there since May of 2020, it would have looked very different. And the manner of death was ruled a homicide. It was determined that her bones had traces of these 3 different compounds, these 3 specific drugs, and these are the 3 drugs that actually make up the animal tranquilizer that Barry used on his farm. It's called BAM for short, but each of these compounds makes up, it's an acronym, and they found all 3 of these in her system, which would suggest that she was at some point given this tranquilizer. Right. All 3 of these drugs were found in her bone marrow. It was also revealed that her body had started to metabolize this drug before she died, meaning that her death was not instant. So BAM is typically not lethal on its own, but it can cause brain damage in humans if given several doses. But it was still clear that it somehow did play a role in Suzanne's death. Insanely, this is the most insane thing ever.
Yeah.
The only person with a prescription for BAM in that region of Colorado was none other than Barry Morphew. He had last bought some in May of 2018, but records showed that he was the only resident in the area who even had access to it.
That is wild to allegedly use something that specific and
Yes.
everything, and to be the only one. Like, what are you going to do now? I mean, how do you point it away from you?
Right. How do you explain that one, Barry? Like that you just, someone
Was there
came
an
in your
elk?
house and took it from you. What would be what would you
Right.
even, how would you even explain that?
A setup. I'm sure that's what his defense will be.
I'm sure. So on June 20th, 2025, that was literally just 6 days ago from when we were recording this, a Colorado grand jury handed down an indictment and Barry was arrested again, this time in Arizona. He was charged with first-degree murder and held on a $3 million cash bond. Barry's attorney was quick to issue a statement. He said, "Yet again, the government allows their predetermined conclusion to lead their search for evidence. Barry maintains his innocence. The case has not changed, and the outcome will not either." And that's where things are today. After 5 years, 2 arrests, and countless twists and turns, the truth of what happened to Suzanne Morphew might finally be known. It's heading back to a courtroom. We will have to see if justice is served and, yeah, definitely what Barry's defense will be now that they did find Suzanne's remains and did find that drug in her bone marrow. I'm very, very curious to see what his defense is going to come up with.
Totally. I remember when the charges were dropped without prejudice, that I was very surprised because there did seem to be so many things pointing to him, but I wasn't sure if they would ever find anything. I remember them finding Suzanne's body and stuff, but you just wonder, like, how long when you see these things happening in real time. And obviously I'm following it, but it's not somebody in my family. It's not something like
Right.
that I'm following so closely, but it's 5 years out that we are. And it's crazy how long these things can take sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. So we will definitely be following along with that one, and we'll make sure we bring you an update whenever there is one. Really, this is very interesting and such a sad case. I feel so, my heart definitely goes out to Suzanne's 2 daughters, and I
Yeah.
can't imagine losing my mom at all, but then the way they did on Mother's Day and just that's just
And she
such
was
a
already, and with her already having cancer and fighting through that, it's tragic is the only word for it. A total
truly,
tragedy.
truly. Thank you guys so much for listening to the episode this week. We will be back next week, same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.